a harmonic breakdown of the song Amazing Grace. So Amazing Grace, this arrangement is in the key of E, and so that means that you're going to have 4 sharps in the key. The song is going to start and end on E. That almost always happens for compositions like this. And so let's talk about what notes are in the key of E. You've got E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, and D sharp. And so if you play those notes, you get a major scale. And then if you build chords on these, here are the chords you get. You get E major, F sharp major, G sharp major, A major, B major. Take off this 7th for a second. C sharp minor, D sharp diminished. And that's going to sound like this. And those are kind of the ingredients of E major that are used to write this song. So let's walk through the chords. So it starts off with a 1 chord and then goes to a 4 chord. And we'll come back to some of these things that don't easily fit into the key and talk about them. So you've got to the 4 chord, back to 1. So I'm going to leave off everything that's not in the key for a minute. To minor 6. Come back to that. Back to B. 5. And back to 1 here. To 4. To 1. To minor 6. To 2. 5. And finally back to 1. And that's the basics of the song. Now, we skipped over some stuff, so let's go talk about those few interesting chords here. Let's look at this E7. So it sounds like this. Now that's a really pretty movement there. So what's happening here is, first of all, we're using this G sharp diminished chord in place of a full E7 here. And let me just explain why that works here. So the notes of E7 are E, G sharp, B, and D. And the notes of G sharp diminished are G sharp, B, and D. So you can tell that the inside of an E7 chord is a G sharp diminished chord. And so that's why when it's advantageous or makes it easy to play or anything like that, you can substitute this chord for that one. But let's go back to why does this E7 even work? So what's happening here is called a secondary dominant. And so whenever you hear the word dominant, you need to think 5. So in the key of E, the primary dominant chord of the key of E is B right here. So that's the 5 chord. And so more often than not, you'll see B7, because what that does is it creates this really intense pull of the 5-7 back to 1. So, for example, at the end of the song, you have B going to E, you have this 5 to 1 motion. Now, this E7 is a dominant chord. and it's going to A. So what this is called is a secondary dominant. So what we're doing is we're kind of pretending just for a moment that we're in the key of A. And so if we ask ourselves, what is the dominant chord of the chord A major? The answer is E7. So if you just count A, B, C, D, E, you'll get to the right letter name, and you make it a dominant chord. And just like that, you've got a beautiful harmonic movement from 1 to 4 by placing what's called a secondary dominant in between. So instead of 2 measures of E going to A, you've got E, E7 to A. And so the way you would write that is like this. You have a 5-7 chord of 4 going to 4. So this is called a secondary dominant. Five, 7 of 4 going to 4. So again, you're just pretending that you're in the key of A just momentarily, and you're putting a 5 chord before that. So the result is this. Back to 1. Really great. Sounds much more interesting than just the E, which would be like this. Still sounds good, but much more interesting to go. So you've got that D pulling down to the C sharp inside here. All right, so that's the secondary dominant right here. Well, let's give this a color just for fun here. This is kind of stuff outside of the key. Yeah. All right. So then, let's look at this chord, this F sharp major chord going to B here. And this 2 in here just means that the second of the chord has been added, but it's just an F sharp chord. So in context, it sounds like this. There's the minor 6. There's F sharp to B. And so what's happening here is actually the exact same thing. Another secondary dominant. But this time, so here's our target chord B. And if we ask ourselves, what's the 5th chord in the key of B major? The answer is F sharp. So just count B, C, D, E, F. That's how you get to F. Then you have to know that the 5th note of B major is F sharp. But here you've got a 5 chord going to the 5 chord of 5 going to 5. That may seem a little confusing, but all that means is that this target chord, which is the 5 chord in the key of E, and we're kind of dipping into the key of B here and asking ourselves, what is the dominant chord of the key of B major? And we're going to place that right before it to create something that sounds more interesting. So instead of we have this. A lot better. So again, another secondary dominant, 5 of 5 going to 5. And then we get down here, we have the same example here. We've got E, E7 going to A. So this is again going to be a secondary dominant, 5, 7 of 4 going to 4. and the rest of it is all diatonic to the key, meaning it's all within the notes of E major. So let's kind of zoom out a little bit here. So this is a great example of adding some chords outside of the key to create some harmonic interest in the song. So in context, you've got one chord to 5 of 4, going to 4, back to 1, to minor 6, and now this F sharp is the 5 of 5, going to 5. Back to 1, to E7, which is the 5 of 4, to 4, to 1, to minor 6, to F sharp minor, which is in the key, the 2 chord, to the 5, and ending on 1. And that's it, the harmonic breakdown of Amazing Grace.